And when I go for checkup, they actually handed me information sheets, and they were like, they told me, they didn't know that I was a Singaporean. They thought I was a British citizen. So I said, no, I'm a Singaporean. They said, oh, if you are a British citizen, or if you know of any other British mother when you walk on the street, just tell them if they are underweight like you, right, you can go and collect free food from the British government. So in the council, there are people distributing free food. And in Singapore, there is no such thing. But the Singapore government argument is that in Singapore, we have food bank. So in food bank, they give out food voucher to the poor family. And if you go to these food bank machines, right, a lot of the food there are first thing expired. Then the machine, usually, if you want to get those food that are cheap and worth it, those doors are faulty, cannot be opened. And there's another thing is that actually all the food inside these food bank machines are overpriced. For example, they sell one ketchup and one packet of bihun, and they want to pack it at like $3-4. So how do I know all this? Because there is one of such machine just at Melody Spring, just below our flat area. Yeah. So at that area there is this machine, which means that there are actually lower income families there. There are rental blocks over there. So these are the things that the government is doing, but we actually didn't, we do walk about and then we go and see, but we didn't post it online. And we are waiting to see what the AGC is going to do on 25th January. Then we can post all this online and let people see how Singaporeans are suffering right now.
You know, I am very concerned with that increasingly larger percentage of our population are having to turn to food banks. I think earlier last year, there was an article out in the papers that suggested, and they quoted this lady, I can't remember, Nicole, who was the founder of the Singapore Food Bank, who said that in her estimation, 20% of the population actually now have to rely on the food bank to some extent. And she said that includes middle-class families. Now, if middle-class families are finding it difficult, all right, can you imagine how difficult it is for the low-income groups? And the situation is going to get even worse. So, we can't disguise and hide behind the narrative. You know, it was funny. The last few months before the new year, the MSM every day and ministers were saying, oh, there's a shortage of workers, you know, wages are increasing. And Lawrence Wong actually used that as a basis for saying why inflation was high. Wages are increasing. That is total rubbish, all right? They have exacerbated the inflation through the GST. Prices are going to get higher this year. More Singaporeans are going to suffer. And I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if by June this year, you were to do another interview with Nicole. She may say, oh, actually the numbers have gone up. Now 25% of Singapore population, you know, use the food bank to some extent. So, I say this again, you know, you compare what this government is doing and you compare it with what governments elsewhere in the world are doing to help their citizens, you realize at the end of the day, you're left with the short end of the stick.
Han Hui Hui, I would like to get back to your lovely analogy of cripple you and say give you a wheelchair to help you. Let me give you what we call let the numbers do the talking. I give you some numbers. For retail, service and sales workers, which is the largest group of all the occupational groups, okay? In the last 21 years, they had a negative minus 0.08% per annum real, not increase, decrease in their minimum income in the last 21 years.
That was my first job. That was my first
tell
job.
us about your first job.
So in my first job, I was a secondary school student. Then I had to go to work. I was promised a $5.50 work per hour, $5.50 per hour. In the end, I was paid $5 per hour. That was when my CPF account was created, and that was also when I started calculating. I get $5 per hour, and then I minus away away my CPF, it's not worth it at all. But because the AGC wants me to pay the 22,500 plus, we are going to look for a job because a lot of people say we need to go and look for a job. And the government always say there are a lot of jobs out there. So we are going to document it down to see what are these a lot of jobs out there. And why are these a lot of jobs that the government gives to Singaporeans are low paying jobs, whereby there is no real salary increase over the years that can hedge against the inflation. So why is the Singapore government not keeping this job to Singaporeans? They always say, oh, Singaporeans are picky, Singaporeans want to work this kind of job. If the PAP MPs do not get their 15,000 or don't know how many millions of dollar ministerial salary, will they still be serving Singaporeans? Are they serving Singaporeans because they want to help Singaporeans? Or is it because of this amount of money? And do we really need like almost 90 people inside the parliament when most of them do not attend Meet the People session? So these are the things that we want to document it down and see how it is like. Because in the eyes of the international world, the government always like, oh, there's nobody against the government. There is nobody that the AGC is having politically persecuting. So now that there is a case right now, we are trying to document as much evidence as possible that how the government actually discriminate against Singaporeans and how these jobs are given out because of this treaty with the India like SICA. Then this is why Singaporeans get discriminated against, especially in the IT industry as well. Because in the IT industry, how it happens is that once a foreigner comes into the company, they make sure no other Singaporeans get engaged. Then Singaporeans were all put into this program called the PIP, which a lot of people have actually said that this is how the foreigners come and overtake a Singapore company. They come in as one person, then they make all the Singaporeans become PIP, then they slowly make them lose their jobs.
What is PIP?
PIP is something called a personal improvement program, whereby a lot of people, once they become parents, once they are Singaporean, and once the company has more than half of them are foreigners, right? This is how they used to take over the company. They say, oh, I need to put you on a personal improvement program. Then meanwhile, there will be this foreigner who come into the company as an internship or something. Then they will say, okay, this internship will be convert to full-time, and this PRP, we will just stop this person. So they can do that, and legally they do that, and the Manpower Ministry cannot do anything against it.
You know, there is a term for this. This is called chain immigration. So one person comes in, his dependents or his relatives then follow, and it forms a chain. Alright? And my friends, this was exactly why the British voted in favor of Brexit. You know, and people like me who defend the Singaporean interests, who speak out against this mad immigration policy, will always be accused by our opponents of being racist and xenophobic. Alright? In the last decade, when 1 million Syrian refugees went into Germany because of the war, the Germans protested. Alright? And then the authorities also labeled these protesters racist and xenophobic. So it is nothing new. Alright? It is no skin off my nose to be called a racist or xenophobic by these people, whom I say are the most unpatriotic people you can find. Yeah? So I rather defend the interests of Singaporeans than to play politically correct. Oh, I mustn't say something for fear that I'll be labeled a racist. No! Let's speak the truth. This was what happened in Brexit. And you know the genesis of Brexit. I tell you why. It was not only because of the European Union, which allowed the freedom of people across borders. You know, there was a very pernicious intent in the government of Tony Blair, allowing foreigners to come in by the millions.